Welcome to the Business Talk podcast. I am your host Deepak from India. We are delighted to welcome Dr. Ron Berman, Associate Professor of Marketing at the Wharton School, University of Pennsylvania, as our distinguished guest on today's podcast. Dr. Ron is a leading researcher in digital marketing analytics and experimentation, with a focus on optimizing returns from online experiments like A/B testing, targeting, and personalization. AI-driven pricing and bidding, and social media strategies, including hashtag performance. His work has been published in premier marketing journals such as Marketing Science, Management Science, and the Journal of Marketing Research. He serves as an associate editor for Management Science and Quantitative Marketing and Economics, and sits on the editorial boards of Marketing Science and the Journal of Marketing Research. Beyond research, Professor Ron actively teaches digital marketing across undergraduate, MBA, and executive education programs and frequently collaborates with leading companies, including Google, Facebook, and Wayfair, to translate his research into practice. In addition to academia, Professor Ron has extensive experience in venture capital and technology. He worked in early stage investing in Viola Ventures, formerly known as Carmel Ventures, and developed software for the Israeli Defense Forces. He is an active advisor and investor in startups such as Desti, which was acquired by Nokia, Zimperium, acquired by Liberty Strategic Capital, Abacus, acquired by SAP, Peerspace, Netlify, StatBeat, Casual AI, Honeycomb Insurance, and Incremental. Dr. Ron earned his PhD and MSc in Business Administration from the University of California, Berkeley, and MBA and MSc in Computer Science from Tel Aviv University, Israel, and a BSc in Computer Science, Physics, and Mathematics from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. In this episode, Dr. Ron Berman shares key insights from his research, the future of digital marketing, from A/B testing to AI-driven personalization. It's my pleasure to now welcome Dr. Ron Berman to the conversation. Dr. Ron, we are truly honored that you have accepted our invitation and delighted to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Deepak. It's a pleasure to meet you and to speak to you. And let me know kind of what you're interested in, and I'd love to talk about my research also.
Thank you. Professor, how has digital marketing experimentation evolved from simple A/B tests to AI-driven personalization? And what are the key turning points that marketers should understand?
So that's an interesting question, and these things are actually changing very quickly, literally these days. So in the past, basically, when you wanted to run an experiment or an A/B test, you had to come up with ideas to test. And let's say you said, I want to try two versions of advertising. You need to have the idea for the ad. You need to have graphics people design the ad. You need to have the creative people, the text, etc. So the first thing you can do is you can ask generative AI like ChatGPT or anything else, say, can you please provide me two versions of an ad that you think will work? Or can you look at my competitors and tell me what they're doing, etc. So first of all, we call these interventions or treatments in the A/B testing world. Designing them becomes much, much, much easier, and coming up with new ones, it's much, much, much easier. The second thing is actually the experimentation itself, like deciding when to stop, when to start, how to analyze the data, etc. In the past, you either needed specialized software or some statistics or a platform, etc. And today you can sometimes literally give it, here's the data, tell me what works or not. What I'm seeing now is actually even companies starting to have AI-driven testing. So the AI-driven testing it's continuous, it's incremental. You just tell the platform, please get me the most profit, and it kind of learns to experiment. And one big question we used to have is, what should you experiment with? Is it better to experiment with prices? Is it better to experiment with the visual design? Is it better to experiment with colors? That can be learned now automatically by AI. So kind of this is what we're seeing happening. I think for people in marketing and what they should notice is, first of all, if you're in a job where your job or position was mostly to design these interventions, etc., because the cost and the ease of doing is going so quickly away, you might lose your job, right? So I think a solution is maybe to learn to use these tools and to become the person who actually is using these tools to generate those interventions, etc. That's one thing. The second thing, even if AI software can tell us what to experiment with, there's actually not necessarily the best ones to predict what would work. So you still have some insight as a marketer that you can bring into the play to train or fine-tune the AI at what to come with. And finally, learning to harness the statistical power of AI tools will be very useful. So I think people who do that at scale should kind of be carefully looking at those tools and using them because they're wonderful. They work very, very well.
Professor, what are some of the most common mistakes companies make when running online experiments? And why do these errors persist despite decades of research?
So there's some, let's call it mathematical statistical mistakes, and there's some behavioral mistakes. Okay. So let's give you a very common example. I run an A/B test and I don't measure one outcome, I measure 10 outcomes. So I measure how long you spend on the website, how much you purchased, do you click here or there, do you give a high rating, like a lot of what we call metrics or KPIs or outcomes. If I run an experiment with enough outcomes, one of them will show a statistically significant difference between A and B, okay? Because even by chance, one of them would just happen to be low or high. What companies often do, one of the mistakes is say, oh, I ran an A/B test between version A and B, it improves time on site, and that's good for me. Another experiment, it improves revenue, so that's good for me. So after they see the results, they say, oh, it improves that, but it doesn't improve anything else. So it's almost like in hindsight, they're saying the experiment worked. No, that's a mistake because we know that from statistical theory that when you test many, many, many things, some of them just by chance will seem to work, but they're just chance. If you run this experiment again and again and again, the result would not happen again. It will not replicate. What companies should do is they should take that into account. You have statistical methods to correct for it, etc. The reason those mistakes persist is twofold. This is why I said statistics and behavioral. One is when you design an experiment, you really want it to work. So the minute you find something working, you don't want to go to your boss and saying, this experiment I worked on for 2 months, it didn't work. So you always say, oh, this worked. It doesn't matter that nothing else worked. So they go and just focus naturally on the thing that confirms their initial belief. But the other reason is statistical. A lot of the ways we are analyzing experiments and A/B tests today is still very old school. It's like developed in the early 20th, late 19th century. And although there are much more sophisticated methods that take into account all of these mistakes and biases, most companies ignore them. It's hard. It's not that hard to know them, but you need to invest in statistics and knowing people, etc. So these are the two reasons. I'll give you a few common mistakes. I try, let's say, 7 different versions of an ad. And it tells me that the best ad is going to perform 7% more than anything else. So I predict for the future that it's going to perform 7% better. But actually, we know it will probably be only 2%. And this is something called the winner's curse. So when you rank results of experiments, the best one, it's going to be probably the best one, but it's just going to be of upwards estimate. It's going to be biased. The number you will get is too high because of noise. So that's one problem. Another problem is people are really looking for what's called statistical significance. So they're waiting for the experiment to end until they get significance. But the problem is that usually you don't get significance when the effect is really, really small. And you do get significance quickly when the effect is large. If you wait for significance, it probably means you're experimenting with something which is not important. So the best thing is to stop and experiment with something else. But people are so trained to think of significance, they just wait and wait and wait, although they're losing money basically, but not trying something else. So these two things are the most common things. Winner's curse, like let's say being optimistic from the results of an experiment, and focusing too much on significance instead of focusing on profit.
Measuring ROI in digital marketing experiments can be tricky. What are the most effective ways to ensure experiments actually capture meaningful business impact?
So the best thing is you should think before the experiment what you think the experiment will improve and say, this is how much I care that it improves. Let me give you an example. Suppose you run an experiment that says, I want to see if version A increases revenue compared to version B. And suppose I told you without knowing, it will turn out that version A increases revenue compared to version B by 1%, only 1%. Then most companies might say, then I don't care to run the experiment. I don't care if A is better than B or B is better than A. 1% is too small for me. Only if you tell me there's a chance it will be 10% of more, then I care to know which one is better. But if it's only one, I don't. In order to ensure that your experiments are useful and generate your ROI, it's really important to think of the decision you make after the experiment before you run the experiment. Why? In my experience, and this is what all of the research shows, most experiments don't work. They show 1%, half a percent, like very minor changes. And companies are disappointed. They, oh, I spent so much money, so much time on experiments, it didn't work. If they in advance thought, oh, I only care about this big of a difference, their decisions would have been different and the outcomes of their experimentations program would be much, much more useful. So my recommendation, think in advance, plan. Suppose the results are disappointing, what would I do? Suppose the results are optimistic, what would I do? If it turns out you don't really care, then you don't need to experiment. That's kind of the way to think about it.
Professor, how are machine learning algorithms changing the way marketers segment audiences and personalize campaigns? Are there risks to relying too heavily on AI-driven targeting?
So the algorithms are changing things rapidly in the sense that today, in the past, let me describe how it was in the past. In the past, you had to write a very simple model that takes into account all of the variables and very carefully plug in, etc., and make estimates. And today, you can use like a very flexible machine learning algorithm to say, actually, I don't know what I'm looking for. Look at the data and tell me what works, right? Like, and it's gonna, the number of variables it can handle, the number of parameters is so large that it can find a lot of associations in the data that we couldn't find before. But that's actually sometimes the problem. Why is the problem? A lot of these associations are by chance, okay? So when I teach my class, I give students this example. Imagine I take experiments over the entire US. And I start saying, in this small town, did the experiment work or not? And in this small town, did the experiment work or not? And it will turn out that there's 3,000 small towns. Again, by chance, some of them will show that the experiment worked, but it's probably more than by chance because compared to whether version A was better than B or not. What machine learning does, if you're not very, very, very careful, is going to do what's called overfitting. And you're going to basically find effects in places they don't exist. And this is actually where marketers can bring in their own insight and knowledge and saying, actually, I know this is not how things work. It's impossible that people buy this product more just because we changed from the hour 8:30 a.m. to 8:31 a.m. But maybe the data says it is. Okay, I know this is noise. But it is possible that maybe people buy the product more because I showed them the ad at 8 p.m. versus 8 a.m. Okay, this is where I'm gonna look. So what machine learning is useful for is actually, this is the way I teach it, is I say, the machine learning will tell you where to look, but it's usually not gonna give you the answer. It will tell you all of the data gives me 7 possible things that are happening. Now you probably need to run a proper experiment, carefully analyze without machine learning or with, that will allow me to get the insights better. So you use machine learning as a tool and less as the ultimate oracle of the answers.
Professor, with AI and personalization becoming more sophisticated, how should marketers balance optimization with ethical considerations like fairness, privacy, and transparency?
This is a very tough question, and I'll tell you why. It's also very interesting. The first thing is that companies generally and marketers generally, they're not very clear if they want fairness or not. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, sometimes they only do if no one is upset with them, etc. So the first hard part is ever deciding what is fairness. And I have some research on that that says there's different ways to describe fairness, right? And to measure fairness. And me and you, even if we discuss it, we won't agree on the same outcome if it's more or less fair. So once you even decide what fairness is, then what you can do is you can do two things. One approach, I'll give you a very classic example. In the US, there's a law that says that you're not allowed to discriminate in advertising for jobs between men and women. Okay, so I'm not. So for example, even though I think maybe men are more interested in the job, I'm not allowed to target only men with the job. This is illegal here. Okay. I can, and of course, Meta or Google algorithm, they can target on all sort of things. They use machine learning to predict who will respond to the ad, etc. So now the question is, how do I conform to the law, and how do I avoid this discrimination? There's two ways. One is I can tell the algorithm, I'm not going to tell you the gender of the person. So I take away the data, right? And because I took away the data, you wouldn't be able to tell if a person is a man or a woman, so you can target it and it's going to be fair. Actually, that's not going to work. And that's a surprising nice thing. So this is not my research. This is a friend of mine from Harvard Business School. Her name is Eilert Israeli, and her co-author, Eva Skarza. What they show is that the algorithms learn to find another variable, let's say the height of the person, which is correlated with the gender, but it's not exactly the gender. And we'll learn that maybe taller people are more interested in the ad, but it turns out height is gender, and we'll end up discriminating. So we know that taking away the data is not a good solution. Another solution is we give the data, but we don't let the algorithm target on it, or we let the algorithm target in whatever way, and then we look at the outcomes, and if the outcomes are unfair, let's say about discrimination on gender, we tell the algorithm now fix it. So we use, instead of using the gender as an input, we use it as an outcome. So the way to think about privacy, it's a part view, part research, is not to take away the things and constrain the algorithm. It's let the algorithm be very flexible, but put directly in the objective of the algorithm to say, please don't discriminate. Instead of taking away the data and say you cannot discriminate, you give them the data and say, use that as an outcome and then don't discriminate. So I think this is what we're seeing happening now, and this is where a lot of the innovation is being done. I said it's hard because people don't agree on what is fair. They don't agree yet on what is private. There's all sort of definitions in the law. The EU defines it differently than the US and defines it differently than India. So it's very interesting times actually to work in these areas because this is where things are going.
Dr. Ron, today's consumers interact across multiple channels like web, mobile, social media, and more. How should firms design experiments that account for this multi-channel complexity?
It's very, very hard. Okay. So the answer is actually we don't know. I'll tell you what companies do. It's not perfect. And I'll tell you a solution to that, but that's not experiments. So ideally, the experiment would say, I randomize if you see an ad on Google or not, and I randomize if you see an ad on Meta or not, and then I take all of the data and do that, etc. We literally cannot do that because Google and Meta will not give us even the ads to see. So what companies actually do is they do one by one. They keep all of the ads on Google the same way, and they just experiment on Meta for a few weeks. And then they keep, or they do it geographically. They shut off Meta, I don't know, in Philadelphia and turn it on in New York. But the problem, of course, is then you do one by one. Like the proper experiment will turn on and off everything at random in all of the places. So this was it, it's hard, and it's not hard theoretically. In our mind, it's easy to do. It's hard to coordinate. I literally, they don't talk among themselves, and I can tell them this person is supposed to be in the control group for Meta, but in the treatment group for Google. We cannot do that. So another solutions company do is they don't run experiments. They use what's called observational data, which is the data generated, the campaigns as they are being run. But then, and we know that the ROI numbers from those are going to be biased. They're going to be either too high or too low. They're not going to be accurate. What they do is they do a calibration. What is a calibration? Is they say, now I'm going to run a small experiment just on Meta. And the experiments will allow me to fix the numbers for Meta to match. And because I know how much bias or difference it was between them, then I can fix the other stuff. So the proper way to do it, it's very interesting. we combine experiments with observational data. We don't do just one or the other, we combine them. So that's my recommendation. Again, this is all cutting edge research that is being done. There's a few companies that are leading this area also. I'm saying it's hard because these large scale experiments, it's usually very hard to track the people. Let's say I put you in the treatment group that you always see some type of ad, and you switch from your desktop to your phone to your tablet to another phone. How do I know you're the same person to show you the same ad? So this is why it's pretty hard to do these things.
Professor, many marketers run experiment but struggle to translate insights into actionable strategies. What frameworks or approaches do you recommend for turning data into decisions?
So you identified, I think, what I think is the biggest, most important question. Too many marketers focus too much on what I call measurement. Tell me the ROI, but they don't think, what am I going to do with this number? Okay. And again, usually in class, I have this exercise and I ask the students, do you think I can decide how big the experiment is, and it will decide how accurate, how precise the number is. And I tell them, how precise do you want the number to be? And they say, as precise as I can. So I asked them, suppose the answer was that the ROI is 10% plus minus 5%. What decision do you make? They tell me, I don't know, I continue with the campaign. So now suppose it's 10% plus minus 7%. What decision do you make? So I make the same decision. I'm like, okay, so you don't need more precision because the decision doesn't change. So the framework I advise for people and to think about it is as following. Run, in physics, it's called a thought experiment. Run a thought experiment in your mind saying, let's imagine the results was 10% ROI. What would be our decision? Let's imagine that the result will be 20% ROI. What would be our decision? And you do that for all of the possible outcomes. There are not many. Let me give you a very extreme example. Imagine your decision is always to continue the campaign. If the decision is always to continue the campaign, why do you care what the ROI is? You don't need to experiment at all. So that's first thing, but that's extreme. Now, suppose you say, I only continue the campaign or do my marketing if it's above 50%. If it's below 50% ROI, I stop the campaign. That means you design your experiment to really carefully think if you're above or below 50%. Because you did the framework, we call this backwards induction. You thought of the outcome and then go back, the decision becomes very easy. The initial part is hard, the decision is easy. So my recommendation is not a framework, is a way of thought, reverse the process. What people do today is they say, I'll run the experiment, I'll see what the outcomes is, and then I'll decide. The problem is that the outcomes are almost always not clear. Like, maybe yes, maybe no, maybe high. It's almost always. So like, I don't know what to do. If you thought in advance what you would do in this case, the decision is very, very easy. So that's usually my recommendation. The other recommendation I have is we in academia actually know to prescribe very complex decisions based on data. There's not, let's say, a one-off framework I can mention. The one-off framework would be maybe just allocate to the channels with the highest ROI or something, but there's slightly more complicated stuff. I would recommend just going back to school a little bit, taking more classes. It will be more math. It will be less, just rationalization. And then I think it will be very, very clear what you're trying to get and what you're trying to achieve.
Professor, how do you see the role of human intuition evolving as AI-driven marketing optimization becomes more prevalent? Can machines fully replace human decision making in this space?
So let me answer the second question first. I think for short-term goals, let's say I want to just have sales or clicks or something like that, maybe machines can replace us. Maybe. I'm not sure, but maybe. Because short-term, it's very easy to measure. It's clicks, you just optimize, etc. The problem is the long-term. And why is the problem the long-term? Machines would not have the data to make a prediction or to learn it until they wait. we as humans have intuition about behavior, and also we can make analogies to other cases. Now, if AI can learn to say, oh, this campaign long term is similar to something else without me telling it, then maybe they can do that. But I think at this point they cannot. And usually, what the classic example we say is setting a price. Okay. For some products, most products, if you lower the price, the sales go up. But for some products, if you increase the price, the sales go up. Why? Because it signals that this is a product in demand, and it's like a luxury good, and that people really want to get it, and all sort of psychological things. To understand this product, is it the one I should lower the price on or increase the price on? Like, what is it about the product? You need to understand the psychology of your customer. I'm not, maybe if I ask directly some AI platform, this is what I want to do, maybe they can give insights. But I think actually well-experienced marketers are still better at that. So that thing is a long-term thing. Okay, it's not like a short-term thing. Or how to design the messaging of a product to change the positioning or the branding, etc. If machines in the end can replace it all about marketing, the long-term marketing, I wonder even if products are going to be different because, they're all going to recommend the same thing. Everything will be, I don't know, in the color gray and the same size and the same shape. We'll see. I don't know. But I think not yet, and definitely not for the long run decisions.
Professor, I'd like to conclude this episode with one last question. Looking ahead, what do you see as the next big frontier in digital marketing experimentation and analytics? Are there emerging methods or technologies marketers should be preparing for?
So we're starting to see AI-generated content. So, videos, ads, audio, etc. They look very realistic. We kind of know from research that some people really like them and some people really hate them because they hate them because they seem inauthentic. They like them because they're cool and new and creative, etc. And the question is, how do we experiment and test with those? And the reason I'm saying, we started this interview, I said we used to have people thinking, what should I try? What should I experiment with? Now there's an infinite set of things. I can do videos and ads that do anything, that invent stuff no human ever seen, right? I can visualize walking on Mars. And of course, we cannot film an ad on Mars, etc. How do I know even if I should experiment with it or not? It's a good question. And I think this is where the future is interesting, is combining human intuition with AI and machine learning, and finding methods that tell me now before we had a finite number of things to try, so we just tried it. Now we have an infinite number of things to try. How do we choose even what to experiment with? So I think that's the important thing, that in analytics, there I think we will move from a world of not a lot of data to too much. And there the question is, how do we avoid false positives? There's going to be a lot of correlations that say marketing works. And most of the research says most of the time the marketing actually doesn't do much. It's very hard to convince people to change their behavior. So how do we make sure that now that we have so much data and everything seems scientific, do we avoid false positives and things like that? And this is where my research is going. This is where a lot of my colleagues' research is going. We're very excited about that. And yeah, I think if people follow us in our research, they'll learn a lot of new stuff.
Professor, I'd like to ask one personal question from my side.
Of course.
How do you see the role of content creation by considering the AI tools?
By considering the AI tools?
Yes.
So I think what will happen, we're starting to see, it's going to be a little bit like, I feel like it's going to be like the world of luxury goods when there's value to handmade products. You can make it by machine, but it's considered less luxurious and less good, right? So what will happen is that probably there's going to be a lot of content, let's call it the low margin, high volume content consumed by a lot of people. And that's probably going to be AI generated. So what I mean AI generated, it takes content, creates kind of a summary of things. Maybe it's not very creative, maybe it's not very funny. It's good enough. I don't know, the summary of the news every day. I don't need it to be necessarily the most things. But when I want to consume something smart or funny or entertaining, etc., I really want it to be unique, right? And even think of normal content. We have a lot of movies, but not all of them are successful. So I think for content creation, there's going to be a lot of role for people's creativity and new things. They might be using AI to speed up the editing process, to bring stuff from other places, etc. But I think there's going to be value in what I would call the handmade or the custom-made touch. So that's my prediction. I might be wrong, you know. We'll see. We'll see where the world goes.
Thank you, Dr. Berman, for sharing your insights on the evolution of digital marketing from A/B testing to AI-driven personalization. Your perspective on experimentation, ROI, and the future of marketing analytics have given our audience much to think about. We appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you once again for joining with us.
Thank you so much for hosting me. It was a pleasure to talk to you.